Bethany Clark's hands trembled as she clutched the doctor's letter, the words blurring through her tears as the stagecoach jostled along the rutted trail toward Promise Creek. The physician's assessment was clinical but devastating. Her previous illness had left her barren, unable to bear the children she'd always dreamed of having. At 28, widowed and childless, she was heading west to start anew, carrying little more than grief and a teaching certificate that promised her sole path forward. The year was 1873, and the Wyoming Territory sprawled before her wild, untamed, and indifferent to her sorrows. As the stagecoach lurched to a stop in the dusty main street of Promise Creek, Bethany smoothed her simple navy travel dress and tucked the letter deep into her reticule, where she hoped its painful verdict might somehow be forgotten. "Promise Creek, folks," the driver called. "End of the line." Bethany gathered her modest belongings, one trunk and a carpet bag, and stepped down into the bright spring sunlight. The small frontier town buzzed with activity. Cowboys lounged outside the saloon, shopkeepers swept their boardwalks, and women in practical calico hurried about their errands. Miss Clark, a stout woman with silver-streaked hair, approached her. "I'm Mrs. Holloway, the mayor's wife. We're mighty pleased you've come to take over our schoolhouse." Bethany smiled, grateful for the warm welcome. "Thank you for meeting me. I'm eager to begin." "Well, first we need to get you settled. The teacher's cottage isn't much, but it's yours now. My husband hired Flynn Mackenzie to fix it up proper before you arrived." The name meant nothing to Bethany then, but it would soon become everything. The teacher's cottage sat at the edge of town, a modest one-room structure with a small porch. Inside, someone had swept the floors, repaired the furniture, and even placed a small vase of wildflowers on the table. The simple kindness brought tears to Bethany's eyes. "It's perfect," she told Mrs. Holloway, though in truth, the emptiness of the space echoed her own hollow feelings. She had imagined a different life, a husband who hadn't died from pneumonia just 2 years into their marriage, a home filled with children's laughter. Now she would pour herself into teaching other people's children, finding purpose in shaping young minds when her body could never shape new life. School began 3 days later. 14 children of various ages filed into the one-room schoolhouse, eyeing their new teacher with curiosity. Bethany threw herself into her work with determined enthusiasm, finding that the busy days helped keep her grief at bay. The nights, however, remained long and lonely. 2 weeks after her arrival, a leak appeared in the cottage roof during a spring thunderstorm. Mrs. Holloway promised to send help, and the next morning, as Bethany was preparing her lessons, a knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, she found herself face to face with the tallest man she'd ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned face, regarded her with quiet curiosity. "Miss Clark, I'm Flynn Mackenzie. Mayor sent me to fix your roof." Bethany found herself momentarily speechless. Flynn Mackenzie was nothing like the weathered old handyman she had expected. He couldn't be more than 35, with a quiet strength that seemed to fill her small doorway. "Yes, thank you," she finally managed. "The leak is above my bed, I'm afraid." Flynn nodded, his expression serious. "I'll have it fixed before the next rain, won't take but a few hours." True to his word, Flynn worked efficiently. From outside, Bethany could hear his steady movements across the roof. When he finished, he knocked again, and she invited him in to check that the repair was satisfactory. "Should hold now," he said, his deep voice filling the small space. "Noticed your porch rail is loose too. I can come back tomorrow to fix it if that suits you." "That would be very kind, Mr. Mackenzie." "Flynn," he corrected gently. "Everyone calls me Flynn." Flynn, she repeated, noticing how his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she said his name. As promised, he returned the next day, and then again later that week when her stove wasn't drawing properly. Each time, their conversations lengthened a bit more. She learned he wasn't just a handyman but owned a small ranch outside town. He'd come to Wyoming after the war, seeking peace and purpose after years of violence. "Never thought I'd settle anywhere," he told her as he repaired her wobbly chair. "But this land has a way of claiming you." Bethany found herself looking forward to his visits, planning small repairs that needed attention. There was something comforting about his presence, steady, unhurried, and kind. One Saturday afternoon in late May, he appeared at her door holding a basket. "Thought you might like to see the valley," he said, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "It's where the wild bluebonnets bloom this time of year. Brought some food if you'd care to join me." Bethany hesitated only briefly before accepting. The town was small, and gossip traveled fast, but an afternoon picnic seemed innocent enough. Besides, she was tired of her own company and the four walls of her cottage. Flynn's horse, a gentle chestnut mare, carried them both along a winding trail that led away from town. Bethany sat behind him in the saddle, trying to maintain a proper distance despite the horse's gait that occasionally pressed her against his back. The valley was even more beautiful than he had described, a sweep of blue flowers painting the meadow beneath a vast sky. They spread their blanket and shared a simple meal of biscuits, cold chicken, and apple pie that Flynn admitted buying from the hotel restaurant. "Not much of a cook," he confessed with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Neither am I," Bethany admitted. "My husband used to tease that I could burn water." It was the first time she'd mentioned Edward to Flynn, and he listened attentively as she spoke of her brief marriage and her life back east. "And what brought you to Promise Creek?" he asked. "Besides the teaching position, I mean." Bethany looked out across the valley, choosing her words carefully. "I needed a fresh start. After Edward died, there wasn't much keeping me in Boston. My parents are gone, and my sister is married with children of her own." She didn't mention the doctor's verdict, or the crushing realization that her dreams of motherhood were forever beyond reach. Some sorrows were too private to share, even in this peaceful setting with a man whose calm presence had become a comfort to her. As spring turned to summer, Flynn became a regular visitor to the teacher's cottage. Sometimes he brought small gifts, fresh eggs from his chickens, a book he thought she might enjoy, or wildflowers gathered from the prairie. The townsfolk noticed, of course, but Bethany found she cared less about their whispers than she might have expected. On a warm July evening, he invited her to attend the town's Independence Day celebration with him. The entire community gathered for a picnic, followed by music and dancing beneath the stars. When Flynn led her onto the makeshift dance floor, his hand gentle at her waist, Bethany felt something unfamiliar stir within her, a quiet happiness she had not expected to feel again. "You dance well for a rancher," she teased as they moved to the fiddle's melody. "Had a mother who insisted her sons should know how to behave in polite company," he replied with a smile, "though I haven't had much occasion to practice in recent years." Later, as he walked her home, their hands brushed accidentally, then deliberately, until his fingers entwined with hers. At her door, he hesitated, then leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her cheek. "Good night, Bethany," he said, her name sounding like a caress in his deep voice. That night, Bethany lay awake, her thoughts churning. She was developing feelings for Flynn Mackenzie, feelings that frightened and exhilarated her in equal measure. But how could she allow herself to love again when she could never give him children? No man, especially one as kind and good as Flynn, should be denied the chance to be a father. Summer passed in a golden haze. Flynn took Bethany riding across his land, showing her the small herd of cattle he was building and the orchard he had planted. They shared meals, conversations, and increasingly tender moments. In August, under the meteor-streaked sky, he finally kissed her properly, a gentle meeting of lips that deepened into something that left them both breathless. But as their relationship grew, so did Bethany's anxiety. Each tender moment brought them closer to a future she couldn't give him. The doctor's letter, still hidden in her drawer, seemed to burn through the wood like an accusation. One evening in late September, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset, Flynn took her hand in his. "Bethany," he said, his voice serious, "I've been thinking about us, about the future." Her heart constricted. "Flynn, please let me finish. I know it hasn't been that long, but I've never felt this way about anyone. I love you, Bethany. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears filled her eyes as she gently withdrew her hand from his. "There are things you don't know about me." Flynn's blue eyes held her steadily. "Then tell me." Taking a deep breath, Bethany rose and went inside, returning with the doctor's letter. Wordlessly, she handed it to him. She watched as he read it, his brow furrowing. "I can never give you children, Flynn," she said when he looked up. "The fever I had 2 years ago, it damaged something inside me. The doctor was quite certain." Flynn carefully folded the letter and set it aside. "Is that why you came west?" "To run away from this, partly," she admitted. "I thought teaching would fill the void, that I could pour my maternal instincts into other people's children, but I never expected to meet someone like you, to fall in love again." "And have you fallen in love again?" The directness of his question brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "but it doesn't change the facts. You deserve a complete woman, one who can give you sons and daughters." Flynn's jaw tightened. "Don't ever say that again," he said, his voice low but intense. "You are complete, Bethany. Your worth isn't measured by your ability to bear children." "But no," he interrupted. "I fell in love with you, your mind, your heart, your spirit. I want to marry you, children or no children." She wanted desperately to believe him, but fear held her back. "You say that now, but what about years from now? What if you change your mind?" "I won't," he promised, "but I'll give you time to believe that. I'm not going anywhere, Bethany." True to his word, Flynn didn't pressure her for an answer to his unspoken proposal. Instead, he continued to court her through the golden autumn days, sharing stories of his past and dreams for the future. He spoke of expanding his ranch, building a larger house, planting more fruit trees, and always, he included her in these visions, never mentioning children but making it clear she was central to all his plans. As winter approached, Bethany found herself increasingly drawn to the future Flynn described. The loneliness that had been her constant companion since Edward's death had receded, replaced by a tentative hope. Perhaps she could have happiness again, even if it looked different from what she had once imagined. In early December, a blizzard swept through Promise Creek, forcing the school to close. Flynn appeared at her door, concerned about her weathering the storm alone. "My ranch is more sheltered," he said, "and I have enough firewood to last the winter. Come stay until the storm passes." Propriety demanded she refuse, but the howling wind and her own desire for his company won out. They rode to his ranch wrapped in heavy blankets, the journey taking twice as long in the blinding snow. Flynn's home was modest, but solid, a 2-room cabin with a stone fireplace and sturdy furniture he had crafted himself. As night fell and the storm intensified, Bethany knew she would be staying longer than planned. Flynn gave her his bed and prepared to sleep by the fire, ever the gentleman. In the darkest hour of night, Bethany woke to the sound of the wind battering the cabin. Unable to sleep, she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and stepped into the main room. Flynn was awake too, sitting before the fire, his face thoughtful in the flickering light. She sat beside him on the hearth rug, and they talked quietly as the storm raged outside. In that intimate darkness, sheltered from the world, Bethany finally gave voice to her deepest fear. "I always dreamed of being a mother," she confessed. "Since I was a little girl, I imagined holding my own child, watching them grow, when the doctor told me it would never happen." Her voice broke. It felt like losing part of myself. Flynn took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "I understand dreams," he said quietly. "After the war, I dreamed of peace, of building something instead of destroying. But dreams can change, Bethany. They can grow to include new possibilities. What if your dream includes children of your own? Then we would find another way to have a family," he said simply. "There are children who need homes, who have lost their parents to disease or accident. We could give them love, a future." The idea had never occurred to her that parenthood might come through a different path than the one she had imagined. The possibility opened like a door in her mind, letting in a fresh breeze of hope. When the storm finally passed 3 days later, something had shifted between them. Returning to town caused a predictable flurry of gossip, but Bethany found she didn't care. What mattered was the certainty that had grown in her heart during those snow-bound days. On Christmas Eve, Flynn invited her to the ranch again, this time with the town's knowledge and blessing. He had decorated a small pine tree with paper ornaments and candles, and beneath it sat a crudely wrapped package. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a wooden box, beautifully carved with wildflowers. When she lifted the lid, she found a simple gold ring nestled on a bed of blue velvet. "It was my mother's," Flynn said, his voice husky with emotion. "Bethany Clark, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me, be my partner in whatever life brings us?" This time there was no hesitation. "Yes," she whispered, her heart full. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed on New Year's Day, 1874, in Promise Creek's small church. The entire town turned out for the celebration, genuinely happy for the schoolteacher and the quiet rancher who had found each other. Bethany wore a simple ivory dress with sprigs of dried lavender in her hair, and Flynn looked uncommonly handsome in his best suit. Winter passed in a haze of newlywed bliss. Bethany continued teaching while Flynn worked the ranch, but each evening they returned to each other, building a life filled with love and laughter. As spring approached, they began planning additions to the ranch house, making room for the future they hoped to share. In April, tragedy struck the neighboring homestead when influenza claimed both parents, leaving behind 7-year-old twins, a boy and girl with solemn eyes, and no remaining family. The community rallied to care for them temporarily, but their future remained uncertain. Flynn came home one evening to find Bethany unusually quiet, her mind clearly troubled. "What is it, love?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. "I've been thinking about the Mason twins," she said. "They're good children, Flynn, smart and kind despite all they've lost. And they need a home, a family." Flynn studied her face carefully. "Are you suggesting what I think you are? Would you consider it, taking them in, raising them as our own?" Instead of answering immediately, Flynn asked, "Have you spoken with them? Do they know you're thinking of this?" "Emma has been coming early to school for extra help with her reading," Bethany explained. "Today she asked me if God sends people to new parents when their first ones go to heaven." Her voice caught. "Flynn, I think they're asking in their own way." Flynn was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Let's talk to them properly, make sure they understand, and we'll need to speak with the judge about making it legal." The process moved surprisingly quickly. The community, already caring for the children, supported the Mackenzies' petition to adopt Emma and Ethan Mason. Judge Parker, seeing the genuine affection developing between the children and the couple, expedited the legal proceedings. In early June, the twins moved to the ranch permanently. Flynn had expanded the cabin, adding a bedroom for the children with a window that looked out over the mountains. Watching Emma and Ethan explore their new home, their faces alight with cautious excitement, Bethany felt her heart expand with love she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. That night after the children were asleep, she and Flynn sat on the porch, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed at the star-filled sky. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "They're wonderful children, Flynn. When I think how close I came to refusing your proposal because I couldn't bear children of my own." He kissed her temple gently. "Sometimes life has other plans for us than the ones we make." Summer passed in a blur of activity as they all adjusted to their new family arrangement. The twins blossomed under Bethany and Flynn's care, gradually leaving behind the shadow of grief that had dimmed their young spirits. Emma developed a love for books that matched Bethany's, while Ethan followed Flynn everywhere, soaking up knowledge about ranching and carpentry. In August, Bethany began feeling unwell, tired in the mornings, queasy at the smell of coffee. At first, she attributed it to the excitement and work of caring for the twins. But when the symptoms persisted, she reluctantly visited the town's new doctor, expecting to hear she had a summer illness. Dr. Wilson, however, had different news. "Mrs. Mackenzie," he said, his eyes twinkling above his spectacles, "you're going to have a baby. I'd say you're about 3 months along." Bethany stared at him in disbelief. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I was told I could never conceive." The doctor shrugged. "Medicine isn't an exact science, madam. Sometimes previous diagnoses are wrong or conditions change. But I've delivered hundreds of babies, and I'm certain you're carrying one now." She rode home in a daze, her mind struggling to absorb the miraculous news. Flynn was building a new corral with Ethan's enthusiastic assistance when she arrived. One look at her face, and he handed the tools to the boy with instructions to continue, then hurried to help her down from the wagon. "What is it? What did the doctor say?" His face was creased with worry. Bethany took his hands in hers, still hardly believing the words she was about to speak. "Flynn," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby." His expression transformed from concern to utter astonishment. "But the doctor in Boston said—" "He was wrong," she interrupted, a smile breaking through her tears. "Dr. Wilson says I'm already 3 months along. We'll have a child in February." Flynn gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she might break. When he finally released her, there were tears in his blue eyes. "The twins," he said suddenly. "Do you think they'll be upset, feel replaced?" It was so like him to think of others first, one of the countless reasons she loved him. "We'll make sure they know this baby doesn't change how we feel about them," she assured him. "They're our children too, Flynn. This baby will be their brother or sister." That evening they sat the twins down and shared the news. After a moment of surprised silence, Emma asked thoughtfully, "Where do babies come from?" Flynn choked on his coffee while Bethany stifled a laugh. "From God," she said simply. "Sometimes in ways we don't expect." Ethan frowned. "But I thought we were your children now." Flynn knelt beside the boy's chair. "You are," he said firmly. "Adopting you and Emma was a choice we made because we love you. This baby doesn't change that. It just means our family will grow a little larger." "So the baby is a surprise?" Emma asked, her young face serious. "Yes," Bethany said softly. "A wonderful surprise." Flynn looked at her across the table, his eyes filled with love. "Then God has given us one by surprise," he said, his voice catching slightly. "A blessing none of us expected." As her pregnancy progressed, Bethany marveled at the miracle growing within her. The twins became protective of her, with Emma reading to her when she needed to rest, and Ethan insisting on carrying even the lightest parcels. Flynn was even more attentive, if that were possible, constantly finding ways to make her comfortable. Winter arrived with a gentleness unusual for Wyoming. In the quiet evenings, as snow dusted the land outside, the four of them would sit by the fire reading, talking, or simply enjoying each other's company. Sometimes Bethany would catch Flynn watching her with an expression of wonder, his eyes moving from her face to her rounded belly as if he still couldn't believe their good fortune. February brought heavy snows and the first contractions. Flynn sent Ethan on horseback for the doctor, while Emma helped prepare the bedroom. Dr. Wilson arrived just in time for the final hours of labor, coaching Flynn as he assisted with the delivery. Their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry, her tiny fists waving in protest at the cold air. She had Flynn's blue eyes and a dusting of dark hair that Bethany was certain would curl like her own. "She's perfect," Flynn whispered, cradling the swaddled infant with hands that suddenly seemed too large and rough for such a delicate task. "What will you name her?" Emma asked, peering at her new sister with undisguised fascination. Bethany and Flynn exchanged a look, having discussed this moment many times over the past months. "Hope," Bethany said softly. "Her name is Hope." It seemed the only fitting name for the child who had been conceived against all medical certainty, who represented the future Bethany had once believed was forever denied her. As spring returned to the Wyoming territory, the Mackenzie family settled into their new rhythm. Hope grew stronger each day, her smile brightening their lives like the sun warming the earth after winter. The twins doted on their little sister, already planning all the things they would teach her when she was older. On a mild April evening, with Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Bethany and Flynn sat on their porch watching Emma and Ethan chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Flynn's arm encircled her shoulders, drawing her close against his side. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked, his voice soft with wonder. "When you first came to Promise Creek, did you ever think your life would turn out this way?" Bethany thought back to that day nearly 2 years ago when she had stepped off the stagecoach, heart heavy with grief and loss, clutching a doctor's letter that promised a barren future. How could she have known then that the greatest joys of her life lay ahead: a husband who loved her completely, 3 beautiful children, and a home filled with laughter? "No," she admitted, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I never imagined happiness like this. It's more than I ever dared to hope for." Flynn pressed a kiss to her hair. "That's the thing about hope," he said, his gaze moving from the playing twins to the cradle where their miracle slept. "Sometimes it finds you when you least expect it." As night fell gently over the ranch, Bethany Clark Mackenzie knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just hope, but home in this wild, beautiful land, and in the arms of the man who had helped her believe in miracles again.